To our next session, folks, if you want to make your way. And those of you watching online, thanks again for joining us. I feel a little bit disconnected from you, but would love to hear from you. So you can email or put a comment on YouTube, and we'll be able to see that. All right, folks, we're going to talk about discovering God's will for my life, which is a huge, huge topic. And we all want to know what God's will is for our lives, don't we? That's been kind of a number one burning topic for a lot of us. And we're going to try to, because we're at the knowing section, so we want to talk a little bit about how do we discover God's will. Now, this next section, I got a lot of this from a pastor here in America at North Point in Atlanta, Georgia, by the name of Andy Stanley. And he talks about these three different kinds of will: the providential, the moral, and the personal. He says the providential will of God is referring to what God has planned to do in his sovereignty, and he's going to do it no matter what. No matter what you do, no matter what, he is going to accomplish it. God has, in his sovereignty, a plan for this world. And what do we do, says Andy? We must pray about that. God, give me understanding, give me revelation. Think about some of the prophets. Daniel, right? He's fasting and praying. He say, God, give me revelation. Help me to understand what's going to happen in the future, right? And so the providential will is not something that we necessarily can do a whole lot, but we can pray for understanding. Say, God, give me understanding about your providential will. He said the moral will is referring to what God has required us to do, what God tells us to do in his word. It's the moral will of God. We could talk about the 10 Commandments as a starting point, right? And those are really bound up in Jesus' 2 commands. You remember what Jesus said? There was a guy that came to him and said, hey, Jesus, what's your biggie? What's your number one command? And Jesus said, I can't do one, but I can do 2. And what was the first one? Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Those are actually the first 4 commandments, if you think about it. The first 4 commandments are all about making God holy. Don't take his name in vain. It's all about loving God, right? The first 4 commandments. Love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And what's the second command? Love your neighbor as yourself. If you love your neighbor, you're not going to steal, you're not going to kill, you're not going to covet. It's really wrapping up the last 6. And Jesus kind of boiled it all down to 2. So that's the moral will. Then the personal will. Oh my goodness, what do I do? So many options. I could do this, I could do that. How do I find my way through this mess? The personal will of God refers to what God wants you to do specifically. That's the one most of us obsess over. That's the one most of us struggle with, right? What am I to do personally? And I love the way Andy says this. He says that what we do is this is really what God reveals to us when we surrender to his providential and his moral will. What you and I are called to do is to go, God, what have you revealed? Moral will. May I do that? And help me to understand what you are doing in the world. And then I want to join you. When my wife and I moved to Thailand, we were getting ready to build a brand new nonprofit organization. Somebody gave us a book that was called Experiencing God, had a burning bush on the front. Does anybody remember that? A Blackaby's book. And it was one of those pop books, kind of like Rick Warren's The Purpose-Driven Life that came out many years later. But somebody gave us that book, and it was so powerful for us to read it, because you know what we were doing? We were building an organization, and what do we typically do? We build something, and then we say, hey, God, would you come and bless this thing? And God's going, hey, what I've already built is already blessed. Bono, the great theologian from U2, have you ever heard of a band called U2? Bono actually said that one time. He said, what God's already doing is already blessed. So do what God is doing. In other words, join God. And this changed my wife and I when we moved to Asia. No longer were we saying, here's what we got to build and God come bless this thing. But we began to lift up our eyes and say, God, what are you doing in Asia? We began to work with other Christians. We began to see other people who were doing God's work. We began to join them. That book, Experiencing God, was so powerful because basically what Blackaby said is that God is at work in our world and we must join him. Here's what you and I do. We pray, oh God, show me your will, show me your will, show me your will. It's like God's got to stop spinning all those plates up there, right? And he's got to zero down and go, oh my goodness, what is my will for Luke's life? Maybe we've got this all wrong. Maybe what we need to be asking is, what is God's will for the world? And how can I join you, God, in accomplishing your will? Now we can take a look at the next section in our notes where we're going to discover what are my strengths, what are my weaknesses, what are my values, what are my goals, what are my things, what are those things that God has made me unique, and how can I use those to accomplish God's will in the world? It's a complete paradigm shift in my thinking. It's no longer about what is God's will for me, but what is God's will for the world, and now how can I bring my unique skill set, my unique gifts and abilities to focus in on accomplishing God's will in the world. That's really the desire and the goal, or should be, of our hearts. I think that the story of Abraham is a great one. Genesis chapter 12, verse 1, and I think verse 5. You can look this up. And I think the King James really renders this probably the easiest for me to understand. God says to Abraham, I want you to leave your father's house. I want you to go to a land that I'm going to show you. Okay, that's pretty clear, isn't it? And it says that Abraham set out for the land of Canaan, and into the land of Canaan he came. And I'm going, this is kind of weird. And it doesn't even say that God says, go to Canaan. It just says, go to a land that I will show you, and then God doesn't show him. Do you think sometimes that like Abraham, he was the father of faith, right? We are called to step out and go, you know, I think it's Canaan. I think that's where I'm supposed to go. In any case, Canaan sounds like a great place to go. It's a land flowing with milk and honey. Here we go. Let's go. And we start setting out for Canaan. And if it's not Canaan, God's going to redirect us. Did you ever notice that in life? But you can't steer a parked ship, they say, right? A ship's got to get out of harbor. And our problem is so many times is we sit around, we're so afraid to make any kind of move, and God can't do anything. He can't show anything because we're not moving. I was talking with somebody yesterday at my business. I was coaching, and we were talking about that verse that says, God will give you the desires of your heart. Wait on the Lord, and he will give you, that's the one. Do you know that one? Wait on the Lord, he will give you the desires of your heart. Did you know the word waiting there in the Hebrew is not a passive waiting? I'm just sitting around waiting to hear from God. He's going to spell it out in the skies. No, the word waiting is an act of waiting. You're doing something. You're going somewhere. Choose a Canaan, for goodness sakes. Go to Egypt. Go to Peru. I just go. Go to the inner city. Go to Lebanon. Go to Harrisburg. Go somewhere. Just go. Get involved. Follow the moral will of God. And say, God, what are you doing in the world? Well, there's this church called Calvary Chapel here in Lebanon. And man, they're seeing people saved. There's things happening here. I'm going to get involved with that and jump in. You know what? That's really why my wife and I are involved in the church we're involved in Chicago. I got to shoot straight with you. We moved to Chicago, and we wanted to be part of a small little house group. We had been in a big mega church. We were kind of ready for a small church. And we found a church about this size. It was called The Bridge. You can look up The Bridge if you want online. And, we went to it because we found it on Google, and we hadn't been to church for a couple of weeks because we had moved and all this kind of stuff. And I said, man, Amy, we got to stop being pagans. We should go to church. Well, where's a nearby church? We Googled. There was a church 5 minutes away. It was called The Bridge. It was kind of cool. Close by church. And we showed up, and people were friendly. There was diversity. But you know what really got us excited is that people were getting baptized. People were getting saved. We just baptized over 100 people a few weekends ago. It was so exciting. People were cheering and screaming and clapping. Now, we're in a city, so we have more people than probably here in Lebanon. But I'm telling you, I want to be where God is moving. And do you think I agree 100% with everything that happens at our church? Of course not. I don't even agree with myself in 10 years from now. Did you know that? In 10 years, this is why people can criticize me, and it just doesn't matter. Because you know what? You can either criticize me, or you can come up to me and say, hey, brother, let me show you something from the Word that you're not getting right. And I'll listen, because I don't get everything right. Because in 10 years from now, I hope I'm a little bit more like Jesus. I hope I'm a little bit more aligned with his Word. And guys, there's no church, there's no pastor, there's nothing on this earth that gets it 100%. Did you know that? I know Calvary Chapel comes pretty close. But none of us gets it 100%. That's why we're given 70 years to try to figure it out. Right? Otherwise, the moment he saved you, he would have gone zap and taken you home. But he gives you all this time on the planet to figure it out and to accomplish his will, to join him. And what do? We obey his moral will. We pray for understanding on his providential. And you know what God will do when we start to move? God will begin to reveal stuff. If you would have told me 15, 20, 30 years ago where I'm at today, I would have laughed in your face. I would have never dreamed. I had no plans or goals to be what I'm doing today. None. I was going to take over my dad's concrete business. My friend Daniel here, by the way, used to work for a big concrete company. I worked for Daniel. I loved this company because I'm a concrete guy. You were gonna get me on a riding power trolley. I've never been on one of those before. I love concrete people. This guy ran a big concrete company. I was going to run my dad's business. That's what I was going to do. Instead, I wound up teaching school in Western Canada. And when I was in Western Canada, I just happened to go to China and smuggle Bibles and get arrested a couple times. And that led to another thing, and that led to another thing, and that led to another thing. And I met my wife. And then I'm back in Asia, and now I'm teaching and all this kind of stuff. I'm telling you, I would have never dreamed. But here's the key. And this is usually what happens when we're younger. We're kind of crazy and we try different things. And this is why the older we get, this is why fewer and fewer people follow Jesus the older they get, because they hunker down. They get satisfied. They get comfortable. They don't start pushing themselves. If you're a younger, older like me, a 51, I'm 51, I got to push myself out of my comfort zone. My latest escapade is when the pastor came to me and said, hey, our whole board, our team, we've all decided that you are the next campus pastor. We've got 3 campuses now in Chicago. We're starting a 4th one. And I'm like, I'm in the business world. I'm finally making some money. I honestly don't speak in church world very much. Did you know that? When John called me up and said, hey, come, and I told you, I do this for free, don't I? You guys offered, but I do this. When I get an opportunity to preach in the church world, I don't actually charge. I mean, I've got a suggested donation amount. You can go to my website. You can look all that stuff up. But I told you, I will come 100% for free because I love to preach. I love to teach, and I don't want to charge for it. I really honestly don't. Somebody just at the break told me that your pastor does not take a salary. That's pretty cool. That means you don't have a corrupt pastor. He's not doing it for the money. Are you with me? Okay, so I was in ministry, by the way, for like 15, 20 years, and then I started getting into the business world, and for 15, 20 years, we'd get down to like double digits in our in our checking account. Life was not easy. Church world didn't pay very well. Mission didn't pay very well. John, you know about this. You've been on the mission field. And then I started getting into the business world. Guys started hiring me to come into their business. Man, you can soak it to those guys. Don't tell Daniel that I soaked it to him. Did I soak it to you? It was pretty bad, wasn't it? That wasn't too bad. You can charge business people because they're making money, right? And for the first time in my life, I started to make money, and I was getting comfortable. It was wonderful. For the last 5, 10 years, I've finally been able to put some money aside for retirement. I've been finally able to take my kids on some really cool trips. I've been finally able to pay for some things that I was never, like even medical stuff. I mean, it's just been great the last 5, 10 years, and I've been loving it. And then the pastor says, hey, you're supposed to be the next campus pastor. It's like, is that really you, God? Are you with me? I think it is. We prayed about it. We counseled with a bunch of mentors, and I didn't have any lightning bolt. Nothing hit me. Nothing was written in the sky saying, Luke, thou shalt become a campus pastor. We just started feeling like this is where God wants us to go, and I'm excited about it. No, it doesn't pay as well, but that's totally fine. You think God's got my back? I'm ready for a new adventure, and I'll tell you, though, I had to push myself out of my comfort zone because I kind of like this business thing. It's pretty easy. When you do ministry, any of you pastors here today? Any of you pastors? No pastors in the room? Pastors will tell you some of the hardest stuff they've ever done. I know I'm entering into one of the hardest seasons of my life. I know that. Starting a new campus, growing a new campus, working with people. I know I'm in for a tough time. But you know what? It's me and God, folks. And with God, all things are possible. The point is we got to keep moving. We got to keep moving. The more familiar you are with the providential will of God, the more surrendered you are to the moral will of God, the easier it will be to discover the personal will of God. Consider 3 ways to know the will of God. First of all, through study and application of Scripture. That's how we begin to discover. It's through study and you get to know the Word, and the Word begins to know you. You begin to get aligned with the purposes of God. Number 2, prayer and solitude. We need to spend time alone. One of the reasons that we never really hear and perceive is because our worlds are too noisy. We got to shut off the noise and listen, and that's very hard for us to do. The third point is we need the wise counsel of other believers. Folks, I've had so many mentors in my life. I have so many people that I call up. I have people that call me up that keep me in check. Even my wife and my kids. When a church would ask me, hey, Luke, would you come and do a week of meetings? This was way back in the day. I said, well, I can only be gone for 2 or 3 nights for my family. That was a commitment that I made to them. And as my speaking schedule got busier and busier, I would ask my wife and kids, can I go on this trip? And they would decide whether or not I could go on a trip. I began to open myself because I did not want to lose my family. I wanted the wise counsel of my wife and kids as well. Dad, it's too much, okay? It's too much. As we truly seek God's will for our lives, God often puts a burden or a passion on our heart. Somebody once called it a holy discontent. Write that in your notes. I like that word. Holy discontent. Usually when we think of discontentedness, we think about sin. You shouldn't be discontented. You should be contented. But you know what God does? He puts a holy discontent in your spirit. You're going, this is not the way things should be. And God is calling me to make a difference, to lead, to change. He's giving me a holy discontent with the status quo. That's really what that is. And this is where God begins to move us. As we look at the trajectory of where God is moving, and we begin to observe the world, we begin to get into the Word, we begin to learn His ways, He gives us a holy discontent. It's holy because it's of Him. It's discontentedness because the world is broken. It's not as it should be. And I begin to ask the question, how can I begin to heal the brokenness? That's how the Reverb Network got started. Because there is a holy discontent with how leadership is done in the world today. That's why we started the nonprofit. We had a holy discontent. I had a holy discontent about 2 years ago at the kind of the tail end of COVID. I started to get restless in my spirit. I was like, is this all there is to life? Speaking in the business world. By the way, I love speaking in the business world. But I started getting bored, believe it or not. That's kind of the way I'm wired. And I started having a holy discontent. By the way, I'm planning to continue on in my speaking. My church has only hired me part-time. I'm only a part-time campus pastor starting this fall. So I'm still going to keep doing this. I'm just going to have to scale back. But I started to feel a holy discontent in my spirit. And so I was actually open to becoming a campus pastor. When I went to seminary in Kentucky, and I did a leadership degree, I wasn't studying to become a pastor at all. For some reason, when you go to seminaries, everybody thinks you're going to become a pastor. And I started getting phone calls. Somebody was from San Diego here. Who's the San Diego person? Right here. Yeah. I got a call from a church in San Diego. And I got a call from a church in Florida. And I got a call from a church in Indiana. I got all these churches calling me up saying, look, come be our pastor. And the Florida people, I said, call me in 20 years from now. Then I might be interested. The Indiana one, whatever. The San Diego one, I said to my wife, I think we're called to that one. Because San Diego's got like perfect weather, right? But you know what? I did not feel any peace in my spirit. I didn't feel any sense that I am called to be a pastor. And and every time I would share it with my wife and kids, they were against it. But when this option came up in Chicago, I was at a place where I had never been before, where I was open and receptive to even the idea of being a pastor. And that only can be God. I'm telling you, I don't want to be stuck in Chicago with one group of people. I want to come out and meet all kinds of really cool people and then go meet another cool people over here and then go over to that. I don't want to be stuck with the same people. People are messy. And the more you get to know them, it's just harder to work with them. If I hung out, thank you for laughing and nodding your heads, guys. This is great. Think about it. I'm going to be stuck in Chicago working with the same group of people. That's going to be hard work. And I was never open to that. Now I'm actually open to, and can you believe I'm excited about it? And my wife and kids are excited about it. They're completely supportive of it. That's a miracle in itself. All right, we got to move on. Let's talk about vision. Vision. Let's look at developing your personal vision. We've all got one. We've just simply never defined it. All right? Some of us have never really written down our vision statement. I want to give you an opportunity to do that here today, just kind of a short, and I'll give you a tool online that you can also use if you want to go a little bit deeper on this, but I'm going to introduce it right now. A personal vision is really helping you to live the life that God wants you to live. And it helps give you focus mentally, spiritually, physically, when you can write something down and say, this is my purpose. Jesus comes into this world and he says, you guys know how to fish for fish. I'm going to teach you how to fish for people. He gave them a purpose, right? He gave them a purpose and they were excited. They threw down their nets. They're going to go fish for people and they have no idea what they're talking about. But they were excited. That's where we start out. I need a purpose, right? And we want to help you write that down today. Personal vision helps you chart a course for the days ahead. So let's break it down into 4 different parts. Number 1, your values or your guiding principles, all right? Your purpose involves your values or guiding principles. It involves your picture of the future, and it involves your goals or your strategies. And we're going to talk through every one of these very, very quickly, all right? I got this from Michael Hyatt. If you want to look him up further on this, Hyatt, Michael Hyatt. He says, beginning with purpose, we need to determine where the three circles of passion, proficiency, and profitability overlap. All right? This is in your notes. Passion, proficiency, profitability overlap. Where those meet in the middle is where your vocation or your calling resides. Now, it's a little harder than what it looks here on the page. Let's talk through this. Passionate. What excites me? What interests me? What gets my passion up? What fires me up? Like sometimes, you know, there's things like hockey that fire us up. Sports fire us up. And then there's like orphans and widows. We learn about a need in Lebanon. It fires us up, right? There's all kinds of stuff that fire us up. I would like to ask the question, what fires you up in terms of joining God in his providential will for the world? What is it that fires you up about joining God in changing the brokenness? And that's how I would like to. And you know what? Some people do it through business. They run an incredible business, and then they hire people, and then they train and disciple and teach their people how to live the right life. Does that make sense? It's one way they do it. And they take their profits, and they put it toward missional things. God bless our business people, right? I love business people. I really do. I get so fired up about some of the business folks that I've gotten to know, and they're discipling their people, and they are changing the world. So what are you passionate about? My hobbies, my interests could be involved in that with just kind of that whole green circle involves all the passion things that I'm excited about. What makes you lose your sense of time when you're engaged in it? That's probably a passion area. If you can lose all sense of your time when you're doing it, that's probably a passion area. What do I dream about? If I only had 6 months to live, what would I be the most excited about doing? What am I most passionate about? What are you passionate about? John Eldridge once said, don't ask yourself what the world needs. Ask yourself what makes you come alive, and go do that, because the world needs people who have come alive. What excites you? What makes you passionate? Ask yourself what makes you come alive. The second one is, what are you good at? What are you proficient in? And this does not necessarily mean that you're good at it now. It means that you have the potential, you have the capacity to get good at it. On a scale of 1 to 10, you might be at a 4 right now, but you can take it all the way up to a 9 or a 10. I'm a baritone. My singing is at like a 2 or 3, and I can maybe take it up to a 4, okay? If I work really hard, if I get music lessons and all that kind of stuff. But I'm not going to go up to a 9 or 10. You're never going to see me as a musician and guitars. And I mean, when people do clapping in church, I'm always offbeat. I can't. My kids love to get dad to do jumping jack things because I can't even get my legs and my hands to go together. It's crazy. I'm so unsyncopated. And anyhow, what am I proficient in? I did not know that I had the ability to take speaking to another level. Like I didn't see myself as a speaker, a teacher, whatever. And for some reason, that was a gift that was hidden for most of my younger life. And then I discovered it, and I've worked on it, I've built it, and some people actually pay for it today in the business world. So what are your gifts? What are your abilities? What are your strengths? What are those things that God has gifted you in that if you worked on it, you could take them up to excellence? You could actually use these gifts and abilities for the kingdom of God. You could do it for his glory. What are those strengths? What are those abilities? That's the second part, proficiency. What am I good at doing or could get good at doing? God didn't make you to fight yourself. He gave you certain abilities and gifts. Figure out what they are, all right? And there's a lot of different tests out there that can help you figure out your strengths. The Strength Finder is one of them. All right, let's look at the next one. What I get paid to do, what needs to be done, the profitability. Another way of saying this one is the fruitfulness area. What area in my life could I be the most fruitful? Profitable. If you're in the business world, that's a good one. What can I make money at to support my wife, my family, whatever, if you're a guy? What is it that I can be profitable in? The Christian twist on that is, what can I be fruitful in? What can I actually make something good in? Does that make sense? profitability, fruitfulness, however you want to wrap that one up, and where those three intersect, okay? Where those intersect. Is there a market for what you're passionate about? Is there a market for what you're good at doing? Will they actually pay you for it? Can you be profitable or fruitful in that area? Those are some questions that you could ask yourself. Do you have a monetization strategy? Can you support yourself by engaging in your areas of passion and proficiency? And if you can answer those three questions and zero in on the middle, you will find what we would call your sweet spot. And guys, I want you to know something. I don't live in my sweet spot. I live in it part of the time, but not all the time. All right? I do my other hobbies and fun things, and I do other things. I still take out the trash, and I don't get paid for that. It's not very profitable, okay? But I do it, right? I take out the trash. There's a lot of things that I do that don't fall in my sweet spot. But here's the point. The older I get, the more and more I zero in on my sweet spot. The more and more I say no to things that are not part of my sweet spot. Because here's the two things that I want to leave with you, and I want you to write this down. Your sweet spot is where God will receive the greatest glory from your life. And your sweet spot is where you will experience the greatest joy. Glory and joy. You want to live a fulfilled life of joy. You want to live a life for the glory of God. Discover what your sweet spot is. Live in it most of the time. Start moving toward your sweet spot. Try to figure out, what has God called you to do with your life in the 70 years plus that he gives you? And you could call that your calling or vocation if you can figure out your sweet spot and live in it most of the time. Frederick Buechner wrote this. He said, the place that God calls you to is the place where your deep gladness and the world's deep hunger meet. I like that. The nexus of your gladness, your joy, and where the world's hunger is, where God will be glorified, because God is not glorified, folks, when there's brokenness and darkness in our world. That's the world's hunger, right? They're hungering after something. They don't even know it. But when those two areas meet, that is your calling. That is your vocation. We could say a lot more about that, folks. I'm going to keep moving here really, really quickly. Let me just tell you about my journey very, very quickly. I was a farmer when I was a kid, and I was a concrete guy. All right? There's my concrete days, and there's my farming days. I loved green machines. Okay, anybody that's John Deere here? I'm not a red guy. I'm a green guy. My dad had a John Deere, and I loved farming. My wife's dad was a big cash cropper, had several thousand acres up in Indiana, Michigan. I loved being on driving those big green machines, and I loved concrete work. This is way back in the day. We're pouring a slab for a restaurant here and then cutting it several days later. So I loved concrete work. And little did I know that I would end up in the world of public speaking back then. And but that has all changed after I became a teacher. I discovered that in teaching, I love to see the lights come on. Okay, I love when I'm teaching and people come alive and people are like, oh my goodness, this is really, really helpful. I love the fact that there's just something that energizes me so much so that I would even do it for free. Okay, and I do it for free. I literally love what I do so much that I'll do it for free. Does that make sense? There's just something, I come alive. Right? And if you can discover that, and yes, there are times where I'll even speak to audiences and they'll pay me, and it's kind of cool, okay? Because I have to put bread and water on the table just like you, all right? And the reality is I actually get paid in my sweet spot today. So joy and glory are the two things that I want you to focus on. My sweet spot is where I experience the greatest joy. God gets the greatest glory. Let's look at another example of how this might play out in the real world for you, all right? Let's just say that you're passionate about music and singing, okay, because I'm not. Let's say you are. Anybody who likes music and singing here? Okay, we got a few of you, all right. So if making a living was not an issue for you, you'd go from Subway to street corner to whatever venue you could just get in and sing and play your guitar, whatever it is. And here's the warning. Just because you love doing something does not mean it's your vocation. Can I kindly say that to you? Just because you love doing it doesn't mean it's your vocation. It's probably a good idea to see if you're actually proficient at it. Can you also hold a tune outside of a bucket? Is there more people than just your mom who likes your singing when it's in the shower? Are you actually proficient at singing or playing an instrument? Can you actually carry a tune outside the bucket? Do you have talent, either natural or developed, when it comes? Can you excel at it? Those are some questions. Are you proud of your work? And when you do something, do you get sincere compliments from others and not just your mom? Here's another warning. Just because you're good at doing something does not mean it's your vocation. Can I graciously say that? Just because you love it, just because you're good at it, doesn't mean that it's your vocation or calling. I think a lot of people get confused about this. You may also want to ask yourself, could I be profitable? Could I be fruitful while influencing the world for good? Is there a way I could support myself? Could I actually cut albums or whatever they do on Spotify these days? I don't think you really do CDs anymore. Could I write songs? Could I actually get into the music industry? Could I play on a stage and get paid for it? But here's something else to think about. Just because I can make money doing something doesn't mean that it's my purpose in life. There's a lot of people honestly say, well, my dad was an engineer and he thinks I should be an engineer because there's a real dearth in engineers and there's a lot of money to be made in engineering. I'm going to go into engineering school. A lot of people do that. Or my mom thinks that I should, and so they go ahead and do that. Just because you're passionate, you're good at it, or you can make money doing it, does not mean that that's your vocation. You can transfer these concepts to basically any other field. Numbers, design, building, it doesn't matter what it is. You can take this to any other field. All I'm saying is these 3 circles should be an indicator of your sweet spot, the direction you should start to move. And then you should always ask the question, is this passion, this thing I'm good at, this thing that I can be fruitful and profitable in, is it joining God in his trajectory of changing the world? Am I joining God, or is it God's will for my life? Is it my purpose to join God in his? That's the ultimate caveat for me. Can I use my strength and ability, what I'm good at? Can I use my passion, what I'm passionate about? Can I use what I'm profitable or fruitful in to change the world? Can I do it for God's glory? Will I join God where he is at work in our world with my 3 things, my sweet spot? All right, we're going to move on to the next one. From purpose, I want to go to values and guiding principles. Let me just say to you that Alan Randolph once said that a river without banks is a large puddle. Did you know that? How do you like that picture? What can you do with a puddle? Not a whole lot, right? A river without banks. What we're talking about here when we talk about forming your values and your future dream and strategies is trying to put some banks around your purpose. Okay? We all know that you can navigate a river takes you, but a puddle, it's just an inch deep and it's just a puddle. Okay? And that's what Alan Randolph once said, a river without banks is a large puddle. Without life purpose, your life represents a large puddle. Your purpose is the same as the banks of a river. It gives direction to your life rather than flowing anywhere aimlessly. So when a river is harnessed, it can produce electricity, right? It can provide a path for a boat to take a trip. You need a well-defined life purpose to be productive. Take you where you want to go. But a river without a bank's just a large puddle. Jesus had a purpose. Matthew chapter 4:19, Jesus changed the disciples' purpose from fishing for fish to fishing for people. Again, it was aligning his disciples with God's trajectory for their lives. I could do concrete work, I could do engineering, I could do design, I could do all kinds of things, and I could be in the center of God's will. Because whatever I'm doing in my vocation is to bring healing to a broken world. And it's where I find my joy and God gets the greatest glory, because this is what he's called me to do. All right? There is no, I just don't believe in the sacred secular. I'm sorry, folks. I do not believe in certain people have a full-time ministry. I think everybody's in full-time ministry. I think we're all called to join God in fishing for people. So we've covered the first one, your purpose. Now we'd like to look at your values or guiding principles. These are non-negotiable priorities that define your character. They guide your behaviors, inform your decisions. And you should have no less than 5 values. All right? Ken Blanchard really suggests this. No more than 5, right? Why 5 or less? Well, think about it. God kind of even by design, you can count on one hand, right? If you have more than 5 values, you can't keep track of them. You just can't, right? It's kind of like if you're a jack of all trades, master of none. If you focus on everything, you focus on nothing. Is that right? So 5 is a great place to start. I actually have 4 values. That's what I keep mine to. But you just can't keep track of more than 5. And so my recommendation is select no more than 5 core values and make those a priority to focus on. All right? The second thing about values is you should rank order them. And guys, I'm going through this very, very quickly. Don't worry about it. I'm going to give you a tool, an online free course that I've put together that can help you work on your purpose statement, mission statement. So just let me introduce the concepts, and then you can go back, and if you want to take the course online, it's all free, and you can write up your own purpose statement. All right. So for this person, this is not me, but for this person, they say my values are family, honesty, integrity, simplicity, prosperity, wealth, and humor. Again, that's not me. That's somebody else's values. But notice how they put family at the top. Family has to be the number 1 value. Does that make sense? They're putting prosperity and wealth at the bottom. That's still important to them. Humor is still important to them, but not at the cost of integrity and honesty. Does that make sense? So it's the idea of values where a lot of people don't understand is that life is all about the conflict of your values. The reason that churches split, businesses crack open, families blow apart, marriages, is not because they don't have the same values, it's because they rank order them differently. Did you hear me? We rank order this one up here and you rank order it down here. If we could have the discussion on the why we rank order things differently, I think we could save some marriages and some churches and some relationships. Right? I go, well, you don't care about, no, it's not that they don't care about, it's just that they have a reason why they rank order one a little bit higher. All right? So that's another conversation for another time, but it's a very important one. My 4 values are right here, okay? And God-centeredness is my number 1, love is my second one, leadership is my third, and simplicity is my 4th. That's the way I define my values. And you'll notice that simplicity is at the bottom. Why is simplicity at the bottom? Well, I'll tell you why. Because let's just take love and simplicity. I love my wife, but I'm a pretty simple guy. And she knows that when it comes time for our anniversary, Mother's Day, I typically get her the 12-stem roses, and we might go out for a date, and that's kind of how we celebrate, all right? And I'm not going to spend a whole lot of money. But when it comes to 15, 20, 25-year anniversaries, we pull out all the stops. She knows that I'm going to plan some kind of cool, crazy trip. All right. And for our 25th, we were going to go to Norway, and COVID hit. And so we went back to Estes Park where we honeymooned. All right. But 10th anniversary showed up. We were living in Thailand. She woke up. I said, pack your bags. We're headed to Bangkok. And I hate to shop, and she loves to shop till she drops. Okay? And I took her shopping for 2 or 3 days. Just blew the socks off of her. It was fun. Why? Because love is higher than simplicity. Did that make sense? Most of the time, I'm pretty simple. I do things very simple. I like to have a simple wardrobe. I like to eat simple food. Simplicity is a really big deal to me. I'm an efficiency guy. Like, things tick me. One of the ways that you figure out your values is what ticks you off. When I see inefficient processes, it just irritates me. And so I know that simplicity is one of my values. I could have maybe put the word efficiency in there as well. All right. So we're going to move on. The second thing about values that is so important, so I can't stress this enough, is where you actually write out what you mean by that value. Like, a lot of businesses and a lot of people will work on their mission statement and their values, and they'll put them up on the wall, but they don't flesh them out. Does that make sense? So what I had to do is I had to say, hey, when I say I'm living by the value of simplicity, what I mean by that is I'm going to live a structured, orderly lifestyle. I'm going to take time to observe beauty and enjoy the simple things in life. It means that I'm going to value intentional serenity over constant mobility, because I'm the kind of guy that needs to go, 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 go. I need to slow down, smell the roses, and enjoy life. Does that make sense? That's what simplicity means. And you know, when I do it, I love it. It's who I am. I really do. Communicate to be effective, avoiding opportunities to impress. That's a big one for me. If I really value simplicity, I'm not going to try to impress the crowd. I want to affect the crowd. I want the crowd to change. I needed to write that down for me. I need to live creatively, not buying into the consumerism of this age. I need to eat simple, nutritious meals. That's what I believe simplicity is. All right? And it's just who I am. It's what I value. So you need to have subpoints for each of your values. Okay, what about organizational vision for your company or nonprofit? How might you choose values for that? Again, I'm going to go through this very quickly, folks. Again, less than 5. Make sure they're rank ordered. I'm going to give you a real-life example of an organization that did that. You're going to have some fun with this one as well. How many of you like Disney parks? Anybody? Anybody been to Disney? Okay. Somebody back in the day lived just outside of Disney. A friend of mine, I'd gone to Africa with this lady, and she was able to get free tickets. So my daughter and I, we went off to Disney, had a fantastic time. And then a few years later, my wife and I were in Florida. I said, hey, you'll love Disney. Aaron, you were singing a Disney song at lunch. It's a small world after all, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And now you got that in your head for the rest of the day, and I'm so sorry. But I took my wife to Disney, and she hated it. She absolutely hated Disney. So bottom line, Luke, don't ever take your wife back to Disney. My daughter loved it. We just loved the way Disney was set up and all that stuff. But Walt Disney was kind of a smart guy when he set up the values for their park. His purpose for the Disney park was very clear. We are in the happiness business. We make magic. That was Walt Disney's purpose, all right? We make magic. If you've ever been to one of his parks, you know the kind of magic they make there. It's fun. And my daughter Courtney and I had a fantastic time. Now, what were Walt Disney's core values or guiding principles? All right? He had an operating set of values for his parks to make them work. His executives came together on this. They recognized the importance of having them rank ordered. All right? Here they are. 4 guiding principles. The show. If you go to Disney, they've got an amazing show. They pull out all the stops. It's amazing. It's cool. It's excellence. The show is the show. It's a great show. Efficiency. When you come to the park, they got all these turnstiles, not just 10 or 15. They have like 100 because they want people to come into the park. Their whole purpose and goal is we make magic. We want the same smile on your face when you come into the park as when you leave the park 8 hours, 6 hours, 4 hours later. Doesn't matter, right? We want to keep people happy. And so we have efficiency. And they have this thing on their rides called Fast Pass. A Fast Pass is you can go to the front of the line if you sign up earlier in the day and you do all this stuff. And my daughter and I, we figured it out. We actually got through all 4 parks in 3 days. we were into the efficiency thing. It was so much fun. And then safety. Man, is there going to be a smile on your face if you're been thrown off a ride and your safety's pretty important, wouldn't you say? Yeah, so Disney says, hey, we have to be safe. And then courtesy. They've trained all their people. Like when you come to Disney, they're giving you high fives. Welcome to the park. You're going to have an awesome time. They are so friendly. They are so courteous. Now, here's my question. How many of you think you could rank order those values the way Disney did? Which one do you think is the most important? Let's all stand up. Let's all stand up. Which one is the most important? How many of you would say the show is the most important? Anybody here says the show at Disney is the most important? Let me see your hands. Okay, you may sit down. I am so sorry. How many of you would say that efficiency is the main value at Disney, the most important thing for Disney above all the other values? I am so sorry, Adam. You may sit down. How many of you would say that safety is the number one value at Disney? All right, the rest of you can sit down, and those of you that have your hand up, stay standing. Safety is number one. All right? Shall we go with the next one now? So you're still standing if you chose safety, okay? If you said, no, I think that courtesy is number one, you need to sit down. Yes, sir. Oh, no, so, okay, you're still standing. You're still standing, all right? And let's go through the, let me get to my right slide here so that I get this right. So we know that safety is number one. And here's why, by the way. I need to explain this. If you come to the park and they are efficiently welcoming you into the park and they're smiling and high-fiving you, they're getting the excuse me. If you are getting the efficiency right and what's the other one? Excuse me, courtesy. And there's this amazing show, and you're welcoming them into this show. And all at once, what's the fourth one? Oh yeah, the amazing show, the efficiency, and the courtesy. And there's a scream in the background. Do you want them to keep welcoming you into the park? No. You better attend to that safety issue. I don't want to come in because no one's smiling anymore. Is that right? Okay. So that's why safety has to be number one. Now, the next one, and there we go. You can go ahead and sit down. I've lost my voice here for a bit. And courtesy is number two. Daniel, you were almost on it. Okay, I think you were the one that sat down on courtesy. the show, notice that efficiency is important to them, but it's the last one. You see that? Okay. And so they rank ordered their values. This is actually a lot of hard work. This is why we have so many breakdowns. This is why leaders fail so often, because they don't understand that people have conflicting values. And it's not conflicting as in you value this and I don't. It's that they're rank ordered. Okay, let me give you an example from Scripture, because we got to get scripturally on this one. Jesus said, I have two values. We talked about them earlier. Do you remember what they were? Love people and love God, right? No. What did he say? Love God and love people. Folks, here's the problem with the church today. We are loving people before we're loving God. And when you start to put people before God, you run into problems. You've got your values rank ordered. That's why the church today is in trouble. We have put loving people up here and loving God down here. Does that make sense? Does it mean that we don't love people? No, absolutely. It's just that we have to love God first, or we really have nothing to love people with. God has to be number one, and loving people is secondary. We have to rank order our values. Jesus did it with his. Love God, love people. All right, I'm going to wrap this up here real quick, and we're going to get you, oh my goodness. I have way more to talk about than I should. We're at 3 o'clock, folks, and all right. Let's talk about your picture of the future. We'll do this real quick. Your picture of the future should be clear, concise, and motivating. Jesus had a picture of the future. He said, all nations, right? All nations. That was his picture of the future, that all nations would be exposed to the good news of the gospel, the Great Commission. Think about Revelation chapter 5, verse 9, and chapter 7, verse 9. Someday, be around the great white throne, all nations, all languages, all tribes. That was the picture of the future. Go out and make disciples of all nations. That was his picture of the future. What is your picture of the future? If the world goes as you hope it goes, as you see your life in this time, what is going to inspire you during hard times? What does your perfect world look like? When you come to the end of your life and you look back, what will be the biggest accomplishment? What will it mean to have lived a life well lived? What's your perfect world look like? What will you accomplish? Will the world be a better place because you were here? What's your picture of the future? Jesus had a picture of the future. For example, I might say, this is a perfect world picture of the future statement that I would write from me. My perfect world is one in which people all over the globe have been impacted by the serving leadership message and are living purposeful and fruitful lives to the glory of God. That would be a picture of the future statement for me. Does that make sense? I'll read that one more time. My perfect world is one in which people all over the globe have been impacted by the serving leadership message of Jesus and are living purposeful and fruitful lives to the glory of God. Jesus had a picture of the future, Matthew 28, 18 through 20. It's there in your notes. Make disciples from every nation. The final piece of your vision are goals or strategies. Again, I'm going to go through this very, very quickly. There's a lot of material out there on SMART goals. Your goals should be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. What do we mean by that? Well, what is it? The more specific you are, the more reliable you will get it done. The measurable, can I track progress? The A, is it achievable? If you set your goals too high and you don't hit your goals, but then some people set too low a goals, like I'm going to get up every day of the week. Okay, no, a better goal is I'm going to get up at 6 o'clock every morning this week. Does that make sense? The specific, measurable, and then can I accomplish it in the time frame that I've set for myself? Relevant, is it important, right? Is it an important goal that you've set for yourself? Some goals are so irrelevant, so unimportant in terms of the economy of God's kingdom. Will I know when it's done? The time bound, all right? Did Jesus have goals and strategies? Luke chapter 13, 32, he says, go tell that fox. Who is he talking about? I love that passage. Herod, that's right, King Herod. He says, you go tell that fox, I will keep on driving out demons and healing people today and tomorrow, and on the third day I will reach my goal. Jesus set a goal to get to the cross. Aren't you glad he accomplished his goal? He would not let anything get him off track of that goal. Okay, folks, here's the free resource. It's called a purpose statement. And again, there's like 4 or 5 short videos. They're like 5 minutes or less. They're really easy to watch. It's all online. It's all free. The only thing I get from you is your email address. And then I put you on my email list, and I send out a blog post every week. That's what I get from you. At the bottom of every one of my emails is a little link that says unsubscribed. So you can get this free resource. If you get on my mailing list, you can unsubscribe, okay? It's that simple, all right? And you can get that at lukek.me PST, Purpose Statement Template. It's a template for you to fill in the blanks on things like your personal creed, your core convictions, your core values, your strengths, your goals, your short-term and long-term, your hopes, dreams, and even your legacy, all right? And what I offer is I offer coaching. So if you want to hire me on phone calls, I can coach you to help you fill in some of those. But honestly, the videos, if you watch them, I explain every one of these categories. So you really don't need to get me to coach you. It's just if you want to go a little bit deeper on it, you can do that as well. But the free resource is really all you need to get a basic purpose statement written, okay? It just looks like this, all right? You just fill in the box, all right? What's my personal creed? How would I write my purpose statement? Who I am? What's my life verse, okay? What are some of the themes that I believe my life is about? And I take that from my life verse. Again, I explain it in all the videos. My life quote, the best is yet to come. I'm always a forward-looking person. I stole it from somebody, by the way. That's not original with me. The best is yet to come. That's my life quote. Again, you don't have to fill all that stuff in. You can fill in what you want. There's a place in there to fill out your core convictions. What do I believe? What are the most important beliefs that I have? Then your values, and there's a place to flesh them out, to rank order them, all that kind of fun stuff. There's a place to write your long-term goals and your short-term goals, your strengths. I walk you through the whole process. Oh, I've got a not-to-do list. How many of you need a not-to-do list? I need a not-to-do list, right? Can you write this in your notes? Good is the enemy of best. A lot of Christians do not struggle with pitches and forks and demons, and some of us do, and I still do. And it's not that we don't, but I think a lot of Christians struggle with choosing the best over what's good. Here's a good opportunity. Here's a good thing I could do. Martha, she's frying the chicken for Jesus' dinner, right? And Jesus says, Mary has chosen what is best, what is better, which is sitting at his feet, right? Now, Martha's serving. Martha's cooking up the big meal, right? But Mary chose what was better. And I think sometimes, honestly, those are the harder decisions we make as Christians, is choosing the best over good, all right? And not to do. And then the last part, guys, I actually have my desired legacy. That's actually your obituary. I actually do an exercise when I have more time. We don't have time today. But get people to actually write out their obituary. I have an obituary. I've already written it. Can you believe that? And I'm not talking the one where they're going to bury you at such and such a time and you died at such a time. But how I'm going to be remembered, okay? I've written mine out, and that's another way to write your purpose statement, is to write out, what will people say when you're gone? What do you want to be remembered? How do you want to be remembered? So it sounds a little morbid, I know, but would you like to see my obituary before I let you go for break? Would you like to hear it? Really? Okay, all right. So here it is. And again, it's my potential one. I don't know if I've quite arrived at this yet, but this is what I hope I'm remembered for. Luke Kipfer was a disciple of Jesus Christ who sought to make the world a better place by making God famous. He was known for passionately communicating on missional living and leading, loving, and serving like Jesus. He was a constant learner, always seeking to reach the edges of his potential and explore all that God made available to him. He was a compassionate child of God, a son, a brother, a husband, a father, an uncle, a cousin, a brother-in-law, a friend, and a colleague who believed that the best was always yet to come. His positive energy infected everyone around him. He refused to focus on the past, believing that one must always fail forward. He developed missional, purpose-filled leaders all over the world who live out their God-given potential for the glory of God. He staked his life on the Word of God. He dedicated his entire life to understanding, experiencing, and transmitting it. He was known for his integrity, his walk matched his talk, and for his love of honey, dark chocolate, and Canadian maple syrup. Luke will always be remembered for living, loving, and serving like Jesus. I hope that's what they say about me someday. I really do. I hope I can live into that vision. And Ken Blanchard taught me this, by the way. I learned this from him. He's the one that has you write your obituary. And he has this thing about, he was a lean, mean, 175-pound golfing machine. And he says, I'm not the world's greatest golfer, but he says, by the time I die, I hope. That's one of his things that he includes. So that's why I had to put the Canadian maple syrup and the honey and the dark chocolate. You can use a little bit of humor if you like. Thank you for letting me share that with you. I'm sorry I got a little bit emotional there. But I'll tell you, living with a purpose statement on mission has been so helpful in my life. And I worked on mine when I was in my 30s. And I wrote things down that I actually took a 24-hour solitude time at a resort in Thailand. We were living in Thailand. And I just began to pray. And for the first few hours, guys, I didn't write anything down. I just prayed. And I sat there and I meditated. And I said, God, what do you want me to do with my life? And God began to reveal stuff to me as I began to quiet myself and listen. And I began to write stuff down in my mission statement. And stuff that honestly, I don't think I would have ever accomplished had I not written it down. It's things as simple as writing a book. You know how hard a work it is to write a book? It's ridiculous how hard it is to write a book. But I put that down because I felt like God said, Luke, you got to share this with other people. So I wrote several books now. But I put it in my statement. And there's other things that I put in there that I just felt like God was showing me. And I look back and I just go, wow. But I'm glad I wrote it down because it kept me accountable, right? And it makes me live out what I believe. Guys, we're going to take a 5-minute break. Is that okay if we just keep it to 5 minutes right now? And then we're going to come back and we're going to wrap this thing up, all right? Go ahead and take a 5-minute break.